Louis C.K. was on Joe Rogan's show recently.
That's Louis C.K.?
Yeah, Louis looking a little older these days.
Yeah, he's been more like Posehn.
Yeah, a little bit. Well, Louis was on Rogan's show, and this was kind of fun because one thing people have complained about with Rogan, and it's inaccurate portrayal. I like Rogan, but there are definitely things you could criticize him for. Mm-hmm. One of them is his obsession with like the deprivation tanks and the saunas and the ice baths and the this and the that. I understand it's a big hobby of yours. I understand you enjoy it. It's great. You have fun. We don't care. Now, I also know that he has an audience much like Crowder's who once he tells them to care about something, they just go,
all they want.
Yes, massa. You know, I understand that he has a large contingent of that in his audience, but the fucking deprivation tank and the weed bro and the saunas and shit like that, it's kind of one of those all right, enough kind of moments. Mm-hmm. It's like me with boxing. I don't talk about boxing a lot on this show because I know people will go, oh, I'm going to puke. Shut the fuck up. Who cares? So I try to keep it down as much as possible. We get it.
You're gay and confused.
So Louis C.K. was on Joe Rogan's show.
Okay.
And Louis C.K. just, because he's Louis,
just decided to go off.
So we can have.
Just called Rogan out to his face and was like, why would anybody talk about this shit? Like, this is stupid. Also, there's a Lex Friedman dig in here, and I always like hearing a Lex Friedman dig. That makes me happy. This is Louis C.K. on Rogan.
These long conversations about what's the right way to think and what's the right way to live and all these many, many boutique things of here's how to feel better.
Yeah.
Because we're just kind of sitting around. We're just consumers. We're just consumers of the rest of the world. So
I was watching this video where these guys were talking about, Lex Friedman and Andrew Huberman were talking about saunas and cold plunges and stuff like that.
Which, by the way, saunas and cold plunges are fine to talk about for about a minute or two. We did it last night because we were hungover on the members only show.
And you really wanted to go to a sauna?
And I really wanted to go to a sauna to sweat this shit out. Well, that's not a conversation you have for an hour with a guy on a fucking podcast where Lex Friedman is already putting people to sleep by going, you ever go in a sauna and then jump right in a freezing lake? I basically read Men's Health and then just do everything I read in there and tell people I'm really passionate about it.
It's just a thing where, like, how is Lex Friedman a thing?
Right. I don't understand. He's a Rogan creation.
I get it.
It's another Rogan creation. Rogan, I love Joe, but he has cast upon us so many diseases that I think he should be held accountable at some point by the CDC.
The Joe Rogan experience came with so much shit.
Brendan Schaub, Brian Callen, Lex Friedman. I mean, too many. Bert Kreischer.
What, you don't love The Machine?
Oh, I've never heard it before. Would you tell me?
Oh, well, it's this really funny joke.
Oh.
Where a guy goes to Russia.
As douchey as Tom Segura is, he's like the least offensive of the Rogan babies. It's terrible. Well, no, Ari Shaffir is the best out of all the Rogan babies. But Jesus, he has unleashed some pestilence on this culture. One of them is Lex Friedman. So let's listen to Joe talk about Lex talking about saunas to Louis C.K., one of the greatest comedians who's ever lived. I'm sure he wants to hear about it.
Saunas and cold plunges and stuff like that, and like the benefits of it. They're two scientists.
Yeah.
They're talking about the provable benefits, heat shock proteins, cold shock proteins. And then I'm reading the comments where some guy was like, yeah, well, you guys aren't talking about is how much it costs to buy a sauna. You're making it seem like it's all free, and like what are you supposed to do? Like, every fucking thing.
This is kind of what Tom Segura got in trouble for. His audience was like, hey, man, you're just talking about rich people shit, and none of us give a fuck. Like, why don't you...
We don't live that life, homie.
Yeah, why don't you be funny or whatever? And like me personally, I don't care if rich people talk about rich people shit, as long as it's funny or it's interesting and entertaining. But if you got guys who are going to sit there and talk about saunas and shit forever, it's not because you're rich that I don't like you're talking about it.
It's because you suck.
It's boring and you're jacking each other off. It's just kind of gay and incestuous all at the same time.
Like, I'm sorry if you're broke.
Oh no, you have the conversation for people that can live that way.
Well, I mean, not just.
But it's just fun.
It's not it's not impossible to achieve. We're not talking about buying a fucking Lamborghini.
Yeah, but I'm not saying that there's something wrong with talking about that stuff because other people can't afford it. That's not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that it's actually part of why people are miserable is because it's a ridiculous conversation. It's a it's not like the way the earth and the experience of like competing for food and oxygen and living on earth, you know, and living in society and just being a person. We've got to some altitude here where we're having some stupid conversations.
So Joe Rogan's like, I heard this fascinating conversation between Lex Friedman and somebody about saunas.
And they're like scientists and stuff.
And Louis like, that's retarded.
That's a stupid conversation.
Louis just looks right at Joe and goes, that's a stupid conversation that you're listening to. And he's right.
Lex Friedman is dumb.
Yeah, Lex Friedman sucks. Lex Friedman talking about saunas is even worse than how bad he usually sucks.
That are just, you know, should I do a cold plunge or a sauna? Like, what the fuck is that? It's not that, like, it's not you should be ashamed because people can't afford it. I feel sorry for the guy in that conversation. It's like it's a ridiculous trying to find just the right balance because there's nothing really challenging you. Because you don't have any real problems, and you're not on the earth. You're not standing on the earth anymore. You're in a bubble, where you're sort of like, maybe I'll try this, and maybe I'll just do.
That's true. Like a lot of these guys, you saw it with Howard Stern. Like the further away you get from people, the worse your program gets because you have no fucking clue what people are into.
And nobody has to check you on that shit when you're at that point.
I mean, I'm just looking at today's clips that I'm going to cut out. I had to learn who the fuck Eliza Blue was. I had to watch clips of Velma. I had to figure out about this Krishan Rock and Blueface. I don't know or give a fuck about these people. I just know that a lot of people are watching and talking about the embarrassing shit that they're doing.
So we're gonna.
So it would be funny to, you know, do a comedy show and talk about those things. But if you're going to be rich and sit in a bubble and not pay attention to anything, it's like not keeping up a house. Mm-hmm. When you have a show or a podcast and you just talk about saunas and cold plunges and all that, it's like, oh, you just don't care to follow anything anymore. You're not hungry anymore. You just feel like you should have the ability. You feel entitled to just turn on this microphone and lob horse shit into people's ears and expect them to pay you for it.
So wait, you're telling me that Lex Friedman is just going to like sit on his show and just parrot whatever Joe says in his own way?
Yeah, he fucking sucks.
Protein now, and I'll do, you know what I mean? And you'll never find a balance because that's not a normal life. That's not organic living. That's not living like a human being, you know? You don't have a choice because, I mean,
but you have
what are you going to do, be poor on
purpose? But you have a physical body. And if you have a physical body, there's things that are beneficial to your physical body.
Sure.
And if you choose to do those things, you'll have a better body. It'll work better. And
Rogan is not happy that Louis, like, he went in and
fighting
said,
him on this.
Hey, my buddy Lex Friedman. And Louis goes, that sounds boring and gay, bro. Like, your boy
Lex. Sounds
Lex.
like a stupid conversation.
Your boy Lex sounds like a dipshit.
No, but I really like this thing. Like, yeah, but it sounds stupid.
Yeah. No, Joe. Yeah, like, Louis even went with him. He's like, no, it's not. Like, the reason it sucks is not because people can't afford it. It sucks because it's boring and stupid to talk about. Like, it's not crucial to be discussing. And now Joe's like, yeah, but it could be really good for your body. He's like, I'm definitely not saying that it's bad for you.
And again,
I'm saying that the conversation is stupid.
I feel like what he's saying, though, is that for most of these people, they have so many other problems in the way of their life that it's just like, I'm not going to focus on my body on this one thing. Like, so it's a dumb conversation to have.
Exactly.
And if you choose not to do those things because you think they're ridiculous, or do you think like, no, that's not organic living, that's not life, this is not life. It is life. It's life, and people have invented shoes. The reason why they invented shoes is because rocks will cut your feet. Yeah. So they figured out shoes. Shoes are better than no shoes.
Shoes and saunas, apparently. Saunas and cold baths equal to shoes.
That was just such a weird thing. They invented shoes because rocks will cut your feet. I'm like, wow, squirrel.
Joe always goes back to cavemen. No matter what, he always goes back to... There's like a caveman flow chart for Joe Rogan.
Right? Getting in a sauna and getting in a cold plunge is better for the physical body than not doing it.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Lifting weights is better than not lifting weights because then you develop a strong body and don't lose your bone density.
All true.
Like, all these things are a part of life. You can just decide they're not organic.
They're a part of life when you've removed yourself from the food chain and from real life. They become part.
That's the end of the clip. He's right. I mean, Joe has this problem where he can't see that nobody gives a fuck. Like, no, Tom Thompson says it perfectly in the chat. Listen to how bored Louis sounds.
Yeah.
Like, he just sounds bored of this entire conversation. Like, Joe, Nobody's taking away your nobody's taking away your saunas. Nobody's taking away your saunas or anything like that. They're just saying, who gives a shit? This is fucking boring. Either because these other people can't afford it and it bums them out, or because, like Louis said, when you've removed yourself from the real world and you have no other obstacles and you have no other things to worry about.
This seems like a big deal.
You really start focusing on boring, stupid, ridiculous shit. Like, love your saunas, love your cold plunges. All Louis saying is, you don't need to come and tell us about it on a podcast for millions of people. There are much more interesting, entertaining, and funny things we can talk about. Saunas and polar plunges. It's the perfect example of, I guess you had to be there. It's great for you. That's awesome. Nobody else gives a shit.
I mean, I hate to make this about me, but I'm gonna. So with that whole thing, like if I was sitting right there, like, oh, this is great for your body, not for mine. Actually, I've been told medically, avoid heat, avoid saunas, stay out of a fucking hot tub to save your life because it will.
Yeah.
So I mean, not everybody. It's not great for everybody, and if it's good for you, cool. But that doesn't mean it's boring.
Have you ever heard Joe Rogan fans like try to parrot the things he talks about, and you're just like, fuck.
I usually turn around and walk away when that happens. I'm like, all right, this is done. I'm leaving.
There was a guy in the sauna that April and I were talking to at the gym the other day, and he started talking about this same exact fucking topic, and fucking Rogan came up when he was talking about it. I was like, oh, I heard Joe Rogan talk about it. I'm like, oh, this guy's a retard. I'm talking to a retarded person. He's like, saunas and cold baths are really good. I'm like, I don't fucking care, quite frankly. Yeah, Joe Rogan I heard Joe Rogan talk about it. I'm like, oh, shit. Can we, like, I don't know. Could we maybe, like, not have Joe Rogan? Like, Joe Rogan is not a guy you should be taking your health advice from. Like, Joe Rogan is not, like, he's in good shape, don't get me wrong. But there's a difference between being in good shape and knowing the science and everything that goes into things being good or bad for you. There are a lot of doctors out there, and you should be listening to doctors more than Joe Rogan on some of this stuff. There are a lot of doctors that will tell you going from a sauna to ice cold water is really fucking bad for you.
The shock that it does to your body alone is horrendous.
And whatever benefits you think you can get out of that, you can get from it from something else. That's not that. But yeah, when that guy was, and he was like a college kid, so I get it, I understand. But he was like sitting there talking to us about like saunas and ice, and then I'm like, what the fuck? Who gives a shit? And then he was like, I heard Joe Rogan talking about it. I'm like, oh, okay, now I understand.
So you immediately went with someone that you knew was more interesting than you because you're a loser. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So I even said at one point when he brought it up, I'm just like, well, you know, I mean, that's fucking terrible for your heart. Like, that is not. And by the way, I know it might be good for your delts or maybe for some inflammation or shit like this, but if you ain't taking care of this right here, all this means nothing.
What? You don't need that for nothing.
Yeah. Oh man, I can get my delts look better or my obliques look better. That's great. You're torturing the engine that runs off. It's like putting something on your car that makes the outside look great, but it's damaging and gunking up your engine.
That giant thing is just a giant wind drag. Do you realize all you're doing is killing your fuel economy? Look how cool it is.
Yeah. Look how cool. And Louis right. Like, when you're doing a show, nobody gives a shit about what you're talking about except the most brain dead people in your audience. Everyone else is like, yeah, when are we going to talk about the fun shit we usually talk about? Again, that's why I don't talk about boxing a lot on the show. Am I passionate about it? Sure. Do I know my audience doesn't give a fuck? Yes. So I try. If I land on it for a second, you'll hear me say, guys, if I go off on this for a few minutes, I'm really sorry. We'll get back to the other stuff in a second. But yeah, Louis doing that to Joe was very funny.